Big story over the weekend, India announced that it would ban the export of wheat with immediate effect in order to control rising domestic prices. The sudden spurt in global prices due to Russia-Ukraine war has sent wheat prices up by 40% worldwide. Now, this has led to an increase in exports from India because Ukraine is considered the breadbasket of the world. So, the focus shifted completely to India in spite of our production being lower. This mismatch forced the government to take this very crucial step. This has had an immediate impact in global wheat prices, which surged to a record high today after India's decision. Let's go across first to my colleague Sameer Dikshit, who has this report.
It clearly seems that the wheat crisis or the wheat problem is deepening globally. The wheat prices surged to record high numbers after India banned the exports of wheat. The benchmark wheat index rose to almost around 5.9% in Chicago, which is a record high number in last 2 months. And this all came into effect because Indian government put a ban on the exports of wheat. And the reason that Indian government cited is that there has been a regulated trade practice that is taking place globally. And the second part is that the inflation is really hitting high. The wheat prices here in India, as well as the wheat floor prices, has gone up almost beyond 10% in India, because of which Indian government thought so that it is the high time and right time to put a ban on the exports of wheat. And this decision is also taken in the light to save and provide a comfortable food stock situation in India that could also assist the other welfare scheme being run by the government. But yes, this is quite a deepening problem globally, wherein the wheat prices is going to record high numbers, especially after Russia's invasion in Ukraine, which is a major exporter of wheat and which led to all this entire problem, the supply disruption problem, which and resulted into wheat prices going to record high numbers globally.
So that has been the impact of India's policy to pretty much ban wheat exports. And the interesting part is that earlier this week, India, in fact, had announced that it would be sending delegates to 7 countries to look at how wheat exports could be increased. We saw a huge jump in wheat exports through the last month, largely because of the Russia-Ukraine war. Ukraine is one of the largest exporters, and because they have been in the middle of this conflict, it gave an opportunity to Indian wheat farmers to bump up exports. Now, this policy of curbing wheat exports, is it the right decision at this point? To speak on this, I'm joined today by Devinder Sharma, Food Policy Analyst, Ajay Dua, he's a former Secretary with the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, and T. Nandakumar, former Secretary, Food and Agriculture. Welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for speaking with us today. Mr. Nandakumar, let me begin by just getting your take on the issue. On the one hand, we were pretty proud and excited about the fact that our wheat exports had increased significantly after the geopolitical situation in Russia and Ukraine. And then we've turned around and banned the wheat exports. Do you think this is the right move?
Well, honestly, not, because if the crop size, as they say, is 102 million tons, I think there is enough wheat in the country. And in any case, the export window, in my reckoning, was not too huge. It wouldn't have crossed 10 million in any case. I would think that it would have been about 5 to 6 or 7 million tons. So if 102 million tons is your production and your export window is less than 10, I think there is sufficient wheat in the country. But the worry seems to be that FCI has not procured adequate quantities of wheat. Now, the solution, in my view, would have been to give a bonus. And the bonus can be given even today, because there are records of which farmers have supplied wheat to FCI, and you could still give the bonus from a later date. That would be my take. On just one point on the international price situation that you mentioned, it looks more speculative, and I would substantiate it by saying that the global closing stocks on the 1st of April was about 280 million tons or near about. The global trade is only about 190 million tons. So India stopping exports seems to be, setting off a chain reaction, which is not accounted for by numbers. And my real worry real worry is by banning exports, are the farmers going to get lower prices? And that would be a major concern. Yeah.
It's the concerns of the farmers at one end. On the other hand, the government is clearly trying to balance the concerns of consumers. Local wheat prices have gone up, local prices of flour have gone up, and this is something which is reflecting in retail inflation as well. Mr. Dua, this conversation about whether there should be a curb on wheat exports has been on for a while. Do you think there was no choice at this point?
You know, if you, Tamanna, look at what has happened in the past, particularly with respect to food items like pulses, twice with onions, that a small shortage actually, given the demand, sets into motion very high inflation rates of particularly these items. Already in the April ending figures, we have record inflation in the country, 7.7%. Of which food accounted 96-month high, eight-year high inflation of about 8.5%, and wheat accounted in that for 9.5%. I think the government's concern has risen for three reasons, and allow me to mention those. One, production, to which Mr. Nandakumar referred to, that from an earlier estimate of 111 million tons, because of the hot weather coming in earlier, the production of wheat expected to be 5 to 6% less. It could be 105 million tons or a bit lower. So government has got concern, and this has got corroborated by the market arrivals at MSP prices to the procurement centers. As against the government's target of 44 million tons for the current year, the government has seen that not enough wheat was coming from particularly a large source like Madhya Pradesh. Madhya Pradesh farmers found that the export price ruling at roughly equivalent to 2,500 rupees as against the domestic MSP price of 2,015 rupees. That's a better window, and they've been exporting through Kandla and other nearby ports of Gujarat. The third point is depreciation of the Indian rupee vis-a-vis the dollar has made Indian exports attractive. The imports may become, on the other hand, expensive, but depreciation certainly helps to pick up exports. We were seeing that. And finally, I would say that we don't need to worry so much about the exports falling, because as of data available of 12th of May, out of the 10 million tons of exports earmarked of wheat for next year, last year was about 8 million, from which we earned $2 billion, $2.07 billion. This year expected was $10 billion. For 4 million tons, already commitments have been given and orders stand booked. The Commerce Ministry's procedure has been set in motion. 1.4 million stands exported in the last 2 months. So the impact of the Indian ban is going to be confined to 3 to 4 million tons compared to last year, with 4 million ton necessary already in the pipeline, as I mentioned. And finally, let me just say that the question of it, that we were keen to do export. It is very clear from what you also mentioned right in the beginning, Tamanna, that we were sending trade delegations outside the country till last week. Commerce Ministry was doing that. Commerce Ministry had even moved the WTO ministerial panel last week to say that subsidized grains from India should be allowed to be exported in the new geopolitical situation where there was a shortage of food. Largely, we are referring to Ukraine, and Russia is going to have a bumper crop this year. But the Russian exports are not welcome now around the world, so we have a difficulty there. So, as it was, I would say, the release of the inflation figures which set into motion, and I would say rightly.
No, but my question, Mr. Dua, and is essentially what has changed in terms of policy. Can I request you to sit back, sir, so then I can see your frame properly? Yes. What has changed in terms of policy? In a span of a week, we first talk about encouraging more exports and taking advantage of a geopolitical situation which benefits our farmers. And then in that same week, in a span of maybe 48 hours, we decide to go ahead with a ban on exports. So in terms of policy, do you see a lack of clarity there?
I would say partially, one could say that, but as I'm saying, we were never really a major exporter of wheat. Only last year, particularly in the months of February and March, which are getting accounted for in the year 2022 financial year, that we became a major exporter. We are a marginal exporter in the wheat business in the world. 2016-17, we started off at 0.2 million tons. That grew. And in terms of value, even the 8 million tons which we exported last year after the February war, the Russian invasion of Ukraine started, we just topped it up. So 2 billion tons is no major export item out of $421 million which we exported last year. If 2 billion tons for wheat, we are not an agri producer per se. So all that we have done is taken a precaution that in the country where on one hand we say national, NHFS survey 5, till 2019, there is a shortage of food, malnutrition amongst children, women growing. And here we allow the wheat to be exported.
I mean, look, any nation will put its own food security first.
Yes.
But I just want to remind viewers what the response and reactions were when Indonesia decided to do this with crude palm. And we were on the receiving end. And that's where the story becomes a little more nuanced and a little more complex. Because we're moving into a situation where it's each for their own as far as every nation is concerned. And then how does the whole system work? I'll come to that in a bit. But first, comments from Mr. Devinder Sharma. Because, we had this conversation earlier, Mr. Sharma, where you commented, if I remember correctly, that how this is a great opportunity for wheat farmers, for Indian farmers, to grow the level of exports they could do. It's a good time for them if wheat prices are going up, if exports are going up. Do you think that gets reversed now?
Well, let's be very clear that the flip-flop that we have seen in public policy is something that would be a question for debate for quite some time. But it's very clear that in the month of April, the World Bank's Agriculture Price Index tells us that the wheat prices in 1 year had increased by 60%. So there was obviously a very big attraction for the trade to make hay while the sun shines. And then, of course, we were at the same time saying that, farmers will, of course, the issue of what Mr. Nandakumar said is what we have been advocating, that at least the FCI should have moved in, given a bonus to the farmers, and then the FCI should have mopped it and use it for exports or by itself, or allowing other traders to move in. Now, that should have been one way of providing farmers with the rightful income. But in this particular case, I think this decision is very apt. And let me tell you, we could not have continued with unbridled wheat exports, thinking that all is good with us, because we have 1 year before us before the next crop of wheat comes in. And by that time, we will have climate aberrations to look up to. We will also have to worry about whether the pandemic extends or not, and so on and so forth. And I think Indian government has taken a very right step to ensure that we have adequate stocks to ensure that our food security is assured. Next year, India can't be standing with a begging bowl because there will be no wheat available globally to buy from. That is one. Now, the issue that farmers are being affected. Let me make it very clear that today, or the day the order came, by that time, at least 95% plus of wheat harvest and sale has already taken place. The wheat harvest, as we all know, begins from central India, from Madhya Pradesh, and then comes to Punjab. In Punjab, it is now only a trickle. The peak of the period is already behind us, which means the farmers have actually got the benefit of the higher prices, if at all they got some higher prices, especially in Punjab and Haryana. Of course, Madhya Pradesh and Rajasthan did get higher prices comparatively. But the point I'm trying to make is that that part is over. So farmers have benefited already. Now, it is a trade which is going to be impacted, and I think they would be able to address it much better. They know it much better how to operate. But my point is that, this halagulla that I see for one day, oh my God, farmers' interest is lost, is not correct, because the maximum that they have stored, those who have stored, is about 1 million ton. These are the estimates I see floating around. 1 million ton out of 105 million ton is not a significant figure to worry about, or production figure to worry about. So I think the farmers are already adequately taken care of. But yes, I would have preferred that if the government had provided a kind of a bonus to farmers, because let's not forget, in Punjab, farmers have lost 7,200 crores worth of crop this year because of the shrinking or shriveling of the grain. Now, that is not compensated by the kind of premium that the farmers have been paid by the trade. It is hardly 15 to 20 rupees per quintal extra than what the MSP was. So here is a question, and I think each country, as you said in the beginning, has to ensure its own food security. And this is also important, Tamanna, because in 2005, 2006, we committed a wheat blunder. Because we allowed private trade to come and mop directly from the farmers as they did it. And eventually the government didn't have adequate stocks to provide, or ensure food security. And then the government had to step in. 7.1 million ton was the wheat imported during the next 2 years. Now that is something
we imported wheat. It became a huge political issue.
Yes.
Our own food security above all else is a very straightforward and clear logic. Agreed. But the bigger question, and let me get Mr. Nandakumar here, and I posed this question earlier: what happens to the global order if every nation, especially in a realm of very high commodity prices, goes into this each unto his own kind of mode? If I were to take it to the next level, my question also is, what about the farm laws and the farm reforms we were talking about, which spur on an open and free market? Does this decision not fly in the face of that?
Well, typically, a country like India or China either enters the market or it exits the market. Prices are bound to rise substantially. Now, since the palm oil triggered off the whole chain, and it seems the new global order is that protect your own food security, protect your own demand, seems to be the new mantra that is going around. So I suppose that's fine. But as I said, the kind of price rise that I see globally, I don't justify it on the numbers. That is the first part. The second part is I don't have the numbers on how many farmers have actually sold or how many have retained, etc., which is fine. I think Devinder Sharma would have probably better numbers. But I would have argued that if the government had a better understanding of the shrinkage of the crop size earlier than that, I think a lot of traders were betting on this, that the crop size is smaller, but the government somehow did not seem to have noticed that the crop is smaller than what they anticipate. And that would have been the right time to announce a bonus, mop up enough for the PDS and FCI, and then taken a call on whether you want to allow limited exports, you want to restrict exports, you want to do it on a government-to-government basis. What is it that you want to do? Now, the question is, anybody who has an irrevocable LC can export. And I don't think anybody has the right numbers. Of course, this 4 million tons is being floated around as a number, but irrevocable LCs, I don't think anybody has a fix on it. It could have been possible to take an APIDA registration or some kind of a forewarned kind of a number that you can play around with. And that would have been a very sensible thing to do. So to me, the real problem is, I think with all our technology, all our satellites in orbit, all the drones that are available, we still don't have a fix on the actual crop size in time. And I think that's where the challenge is.
Mr. Dua, just a word on the new global order that Mr. Nandakumar also refers to, and how far this could go, because it is, after all, an interconnected world. Do you think we will see more and more of such moves as the crisis sort of escalates, commodity prices also keep growing?
Well, one can't rule it out, but we would also need to look at the fact that during the current year, disruption is largely on account of Ukraine not being able to grow and ship the exports which it usually does of food grains, largely wheat out of Mariupol or out of Odessa, the Black Sea ports in particular. Russia is probably having a better production this year at about, I think the figure is about 133 million tons, which on the whole, of which 89 million tons is wheat alone compared to last year's figure. So the food is going to be there, whether we want to let it rot in Russia or we want to let the prices rise, because Russia is a major exporter, let's remember, to Africa. That includes Egypt, includes Middle East, and countries like Turkey, which are all now clamoring for more food. There is going to be food, but the world order of sanctions is going to be coming in the way. So Indonesia has realized it already within 10 days that by blocking the palm oil within its own limits in the name of saying it's required for domestic order, that it is causing a glut. The palm oil producers and farmers are already complaining against the government policy, saying the prices have crashed. So it is not a very easy call to take when you have to balance the interest of food security, which means store much more, keep a greater buffer stock, and if it impacts the prices, then the farmers' interest getting impacted. But at the same time, I would not undermine in any manner that food security of a country, given the current situation, is extremely important.
No doubt.
Actually, as I pointed out, if China and India are the two large countries step into a market or step out of the market, it is bound to have.
No, the primary objective and primary responsibility of any elected government is to secure its own citizens first. And no government can afford to or should fail at that. So that is a given. But the larger question and the larger challenge of how to navigate this growing geopolitical change definitely continues and is highlighted by this sequence of events. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us on this leg of the show this evening.